What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, powered by Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Loaded official visit weekend. Got a lot of big timers on campus. We will break them down one by one, their background, their film, their interest, their rating. We will give you everything you need to know about this weekend, which could be huge for Miami recruiting. First, want to talk about some folks that are highly rated always, and that is Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anijar and Levine. Pete, get in here. Let's break this down. Big weekend for recruiting. The calendar's kind of flipped. It is June, and recruiting is really heating up. It used to be November, December, even January, we really started talking recruiting. Now it heats up when the weather heats up here in June. And interesting visit list today, Pete.
Yeah, and man, the evaluation process, obviously, look, it's still months away, 6 months, 7 months away from when they'll be signing, most of them in December. But you pretty much have to be locked in on your guys at this point of year. You're not bringing in prospects for an official visit that you don't have legitimate interest in or you don't think could be a part of your class. So these dynamics continuing to change every year are going to probably be pushed up even more this timeline. But yeah, really good list of visitors here and some intriguing ones. A lot of guys that aren't 5 stars right now, aren't high 4 stars, but we talk about traits, we talk about body types, and a lot of those characteristics in this group.
Yeah, and the demographic makeup really jumps out at me. So 13 visitors this weekend, 6 are from Georgia, the most of any state. Georgia, a place Miami's had some recent success, but obviously the best program in the nation currently is there. And these are big time players. So very interesting that we're focused there. 4 from Florida, but only one of those 4 is from South Florida. So you're talking about the northern central part of the state for a lot of these kids. 2 from Alabama, which has been a very productive area for Miami in recent years. Cole McConaughey, a defensive end who started the spring game out of there. Bobby Pruitt, a linebacker who's really been one of the stars of that class early on. He was from Alabama. You had Kevin Riley committed for quite a while, the running back from Alabama. So Alabama is a place where Miami has put a lot of effort into in recent years. Cristobal obviously had a nice little tenure at Alabama as the offensive line coach, knows coaches in that area. So something to watch. And then 1 player from New Jersey, which has been a traditional Miami stronghold going back, look at the 2001 team and what Miami did there from New Jersey. So let's break these down one by one, starting at the top with Elijah Griffin, defensive tackle out of Georgia, Savannah Christian Prep, smaller school in the Savannah area, 6'5", 285, number 4 overall player in the composite, number 1 defensive lineman, strong 5-star rating. And to me, we talk about how do you allocate between the portal and high school. My view is that when you're talking about high school kids, you spend the budget on this type of player. A defensive tackle war daddy who you're not going to find in the portal unless, he kills somebody. So 31 tackles for loss, 17 and a half sacks as a junior, lesser competition, but he did what you're supposed to do, dominate. Visited Miami unofficially March 8th, allowed Miami to really get in the game strong. Official visit scheduled to Miami and USC, but Georgia is the crystal ball favorite. He's from Georgia. He's a 5-star. They've had tremendous success at that position. Jalen Carter kind of is the comp when you watch him, and obviously he's a Georgia guy. 5'1", 40 and 35-inch vertical jump at a showcase event. So the testing is there. And you watch these highlights, and at P, you're looking at the athleticism.
Yeah, the athleticism and the good weight to his frame, right? I mean, you're not looking at someone who is too lean. You're not looking at a guy who needs to lose, a ton of weight so you can find that athletic ability. He's not all that far off from being ready to contribute early on in a college career. Obviously, strength as an interior lineman is important, but the moves are there, the athletic ability and the penetration as we see. And I mean, he's looks like a lot to handle for an offensive lineman at the high school level. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. And again, lower competition, but the dominance is what I like to see. defensive tackle is a flash position. If you flash and have a 1-minute highlight with some flashes, you're going to get a ton of offers. This is a 10-minute highlight reel. The production matches, the game film matches. This guy who can bend and control his body. He shows some power, but to me, he's really more of an athletic, kind of smooth guy, even at that size. He's not a bull in the china shop. He's aware of the ball. He can dip. He can rip. He got a swim move. He can really bend for a guy that size. He's not just upfield, knocking guys back. So very interesting film to watch. Again, Jalen Carter, to me, is the name that jumps out. And, of course, Jalen Carter, a Florida guy, originally from Apopka, went to Georgia, became a top 10 pick, flashed big time as a rookie for the Philadelphia Eagles. So,
yeah, the flexibility, you kind of alluded to it there, but it definitely sticks out for him.
Yeah, and this, again, Georgia's going to be tough, but the guy's visited unofficially, and now he's back. So you're in the game. Miami signed the top 10 defensive tackle. Top 10 player in the nation last year was a defensive tackle in Justin Scott. So it's not impossible, but it'll be a battle. But I think Miami really, if you're allocating resources, this is where you want them, in my opinion. Get these guys out of high school, because these body types, this athleticism is just rare. And especially with the production to match, the fact he's not, overweight, spend on these guys. You can fill other positions in the portal, maybe take some flyers on underrated high school guys. We'll get into some of those as we go through this list. But, when I saw this film, I thought, David Stone, Justin Scott, some of the guys last year, he's on par with those guys, if not ahead of them. There's a reason why he's one of the best players in the nation, and he will be here in Coral Gables this weekend. Sticking with Georgia, another highly ranked player, Jaden Perlotti from Buford, Georgia. Buford, a top program. This from Miami got Jess Simpson, former defensive line coach. Got a Jalal Harley, the dancing bear. Some of you may remember from those GIFs. I don't remember too much of on the field, but you do remember him dancing from this school. Perlotti made a lot more plays in high school, fortunately. 6'3", 210, Georgia commit. So he's committed to Georgia, but he has visited. He's flirted with multiple schools, so you consider him an open target. Miami flipped Nikar from Georgia last year. So Georgia commit is not a death sentence, even if Georgia wants the player. Nikar, top 100 player, wide receiver. Miami flipped him last year. So Perlotti is flirting with other teams, 105 nationally on the composite, 14th linebacker in the country, 4-star player. Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Auburn are some of the other schools in play from an official visit standpoint. 55 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups, 4 quarterback hurries, 2 sacks, and an INT. And you're seeing on the film, he lines up, on the edge. He lines up over the wide receiver. He lines up at safety depth, gets off blocks, plays hard, physical, change of direction, tackling. Just a lot of versatility when you watch a guy like Perlotti.
Yeah, change of direction was the first thing that stood out to me for a guy of his, size and leanness, right? You tend to get these taller, leaner types sometimes getting downhill. They have the speed downhill, but there's a lot of times a straight line speed. And he looks like a guy who obviously has the frame to add some good weight, but he's getting downhill one direction, can switch, and track ball carriers. And if he's blitzing, needs to change course and get after the quarterback, he can do just that. So this is a guy who the twitch is there and the versatility. As we understand, Miami's going to continue to recruit these types to project at the linebacker position.
So this is someone who's shown interest for a long time, dating back to last cycle. He was visiting and showing interest as a young player. Pete, you had as an agent, you worked with Darius Leonard, later known as Shaq Leonard, who went from a small school to the Indianapolis Colts and was a Pro Bowler pretty much right away, was able to see the field right away. When I see a kid like this, he just seems like someone who, with his versatility, is not going to be on the bench very long.
Yeah, and look, the main thing with guys like with Darius and even with the body type that this kid has, it's like, can they take on blocks is always the question. As you literally right here see him taking on a block and getting upfield and making the play. But guys like him sometimes don't necessarily need to take on blocks. They can kind of weave through the traffic somewhat, and they're too quick for a lot of times the guys blocking them. So it becomes a mental game. Instinctually seems like he has it by some of the plays he's making here. But definitely you need it's not a thumper's game at linebacker anymore. Do you want to have those guys to be able to, lay the wood? Of course you do, but you need guys who can move. And as these formations get more spread out, you need guys who can play different spots there.
Yeah, so another coveted Georgia player. By the way, it keeps going. We're moving on to another top 150 4-star player out of the state of Georgia, highly coveted, and that is interior offensive lineman Cortez Smith. He's out of Parkview High School in Lilburn, Georgia, 6'3", 310, so a little shorter, but very powerful. He announces on July 20th, so we could get a decision from him sooner than later. 125th player nationally on the composite, 6th in terms of interior offensive lineman, 4-star player, has already taken 2 unofficial visits to Miami, so the interest is there when you talk about a Cortez Smith. The thing I'm big on track background. I'm big on things that you see in the NFL draft when you watch guys and you go work backwards, right? You watch the NFL draft, you see the guys in the first round, especially the guys that may have been underrated players that go first, second, third round. Then you say, okay, what were they in high school? What traits did they have? Track almost always appears when you look at some of these guys. Even if it's not a running event, it's a throwing event. You see track backgrounds with a lot of these guys, and that's eventually what shows up at the combine. That's why those guys get drafted in the first, second round. So with Cortez Smith, it's the shot put, which he won the state championship, Georgia 7A as a junior, had a throw of 56.2. Also finished second in the discus with a throw of 67.4. So this is someone who can really throw, and that explosive power, you see it when you're watching this film. He knocks guys back. He can also drive guys with his legs and finish the block that way. But the first initial punch is very powerful. That's that explosive strength that you see from a track background. South Carolina, of course, Georgia Tech, and Miami on the docket. Plays center, guard, left tackle on film. I think for Miami, projects either as a center or as a guard, even though he's a little smaller. I think that explosive power will allow him to settle in at guard if he chooses to play there.
Yeah, and he definitely looks like a guy who's interior 100%. But you said it right there, D. He looks like he has the athletic ability and the explosive power to play guard. You never want to look. It happens at the NFL level all the time, and it's tough for roster building. But you really want to be able to bring in a guy who can play. If you're going to play center, also have the ability to play guard. There's only one center that can play at a time. If one of the guards go down, we're seeing it right now at Miami. The lack of options at the interior, right? So I think we're going to see them probably recruit a couple of these guys who everyone loves the tackles, but it's not as easy just to slide guys inside. Does Miami have a couple of guys who can do it now? Yes, potentially with Sampson and McCoy, amongst others. But a guy like this, I think, really brings you that interior positional versatility that is more underrated than people realize, because there's a lot of guards that can play center, but there's not a lot of centers that can play guard. Just like we talk about, there's not a lot of guards that can pretty seamlessly, transition over and play tackle.
Yeah, and Miami's recruiting a few guys with this body type. Susu out of Las Vegas, the highest rated center on Miami's board, one of the highest rated centers in the country. Max Buchanan, a few guys that Miami's into and looking at that fit this general profile. Let's take it back to the state of Florida, however, for a linebacker prospect that Miami highly covets and has done a very good job recruiting. So someone that I think, in terms of guys that Miami has a lot of momentum with in this visit list stands out, and that is Gavin Nix out of IMG, program that Miami has had success recruiting in recent years. He's 6 foot, 225, 159th ranked player nationally, 21st ranked linebacker, solid 4-star. In a tight schedule with IMG, national schedule, 8 games, had 42 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5 quarterback hurries, and a sack. Visit set to Miami, Oregon, and FSU. I've heard the comparison, and not in terms of, hey, he's going to have this career. He's going to have his name in the Ring of Honor or anything like that. But Jonathan Vilma, I've heard in terms of a size comparison, a style of play comparison, smart player, pure linebacker. He's not an edge that you're trying to just turn into a run and hit linebacker. He is a guy that knows how to play linebacker. That's what he plays. He can go sideline to sideline. He's smart. He's a good tackler. I've heard folks who have seen him live in games have raved about him just as far as like a game tape player, which at linebacker, you don't necessarily want to grade the flashes. You want consistent game players. That is Gavin Nix. And again, someone Miami highly covets.
Yeah, I would love to get Coach Zuck's opinion on his film, because I feel like you said it, he's a true real linebacker, which we were just talking about, a guy in Jaden Perlott that is not a true linebacker. Miami continues to recruit those athletic types, and you need as many of those guys as you can get, but you still need someone in the middle of that defense who can kind of control the game, be the leader, the coach of the defense. And he just seems like that type of player here on film, again, without knowing the kid personally. But you always say people kind of ridiculed Shaq Quarterman way more than he deserved because they said, well, we're going to get more athletic, we're going to get faster at the position. That didn't happen. And then when it did, you realize, look, we also need some football players as well.
And this is a guy, I agree totally with what you just said. I think he has more speed than Shaq.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe not the power, but he's certainly, I think he's a little better sideline to sideline. And Shaq played right away, as did Michael Pickney. I think Gavin Nix is an early type of player because those instinctual linebackers tend to find their way on the field early because they're so smart. IMG kids in general are known as hard workers. They chose to go to IMG, made a lot of sacrifices to do that, so they're pretty about their business. Plus, that's drilled into them while they're there. Nix is originally an Orlando kid. We got a couple Orlando kids that we talked about here. We'll get into an offensive lineman from Orlando that is visiting this weekend in Demetrius Campbell. Jalen Wilkerson from Orlando visited last week. So Orlando is an area Miami's doing some damage in or really circling. Gavin Nix originally from there, so there's a local tie. Interesting to see his recruitment. I think he's someone that Miami really, really wants to get in this class. I've heard his name come up a ton talking to folks from there.
All right, D, this next one, I'm excited about this one. We got a chance to see him live at the Under Armour camp. Joshua Moore, wide receiver out of West Broward High School, 6'4", 205. And, you know, a lot of times when you see these height and weights listed online, you don't necessarily trust them. But he, from when we saw him in person, is all of that and really has the frame of an NFL wide receiver.
Yeah, he was huge in person. Pete, you remember in the Under Armour camp, we talked about it a couple times. He caught a slant. There was a small fence behind the end zone, and he was going full speed on the slant. And instead of slowing down before he got to the fence, he just jumped over it without missing a beat. So big time athlete. He's huge. Had a hip injury that slowed him as a junior, although he still produced decent stats. Was really, really good as a sophomore, over 1,000 yards for a West Broward team that had nothing besides him. I mean, this is not a traditional power in South Florida. It really is the Josh Moore show, and he has delivered despite that extra attention. Stood out the Under Armour camp, as we mentioned. Also stood out at the Miami camp as a sophomore. Really tore it up on campus, from what I'm told from folks who were there. He had the size, the catch radius, the ability to adjust to the ball, but also has the strength to pluck it out of the air and use his body like a power forward. But he does have speed. He's not just like who was the guy we had? Daryl Langham. Who's really just, that's what he did, right? He would just box you out and catch the ball contested. Josh Moore has more twitch to his game, more separation, but he does have that big body and the ability to make contested catches. Florida schools all after Josh Moore. Miami's been recruiting him. This is going to be a big weekend to make a move in this recruitment. They really covet this player. They view a lot of these Florida guys in the same boat at receiver as highly talented guys. They feel it's a loaded year at receiver, and Josh Moore is up there with all the guys you hear more about, the Jamie Frenches, the Dallas Wilsons, et cetera, Cortez Mills. They got Josh Moore right there. So be interesting to see how this weekend goes in terms of his recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to throw out comparisons, but a Brandon Marshall body type player, because I think with these big body receivers, everyone tries to say, how fast are they? What kind of 40 do they run? First of all, he's not slow from when we saw him in person, right? So he's moving. I don't think he's a low 4.4 guy, but you said it. He's twitchy in the phone booth, right? And I think at the point of attack, at the high point of the ball, that's what you're looking for in some of these big body receivers. It's not just how fast they're running, but those quick movements in short areas. How do they look? And they look good with Moore.
Yeah, look, Brandon Marshall went to high school in the Orlando area, was not the 5-star recruit, but obviously the size and being sort of a one-man show at his high school, some similarities there. Switching to Mario Cristobal's favorite position, the offensive line. It's interesting. The first year, Mario was all over top elite recruiting ranking-wise, offensive tackles. Francis Mauanoa, Samson Okunlola, highly, highly rated tackles. Last year, you didn't see that. Derek Platt, sort of an underrated, solid player, but not that. Markel Bell, a blue-chip player out of JUCO, but not a high school offensive tackle. I thought we might see a return to that this year. I'm told that, they think that the interior class is better than the outside class as far as the primetime guys, which is interesting. Mario's shown the ability to recruit those blue chip offensive linemen going back to, Oregon, Alabama, and then his early time in Miami. So I think that's interesting. It's a situation to monitor, but he's clearly targeting guys with tackle bodies and athleticism with the ability to turn into those first rounders, even if they're not automatic 5-stars coming out. So that's something to watch and monitor with this class. How do these guys, who's going to land and how are they going to develop? Jalen Wilkerson visited last week, a big guy from big 6'6", 330 basketball player from Orlando, developmental guy. Dimitri Manning from Washington visiting next week. This week, some very interesting offensive tackle names, starting with the highest rated guy, a blue chip player, not a 5-star, but a blue chip player. And that's Jalen Matthews out of Toms River, New Jersey. This is the area where Al Golden is from, and some others. A good pipeline to Miami, New Jersey. We've seen a lot of New Jersey guys come to Miami. Brian McKinney, right, was from New Jersey, I believe. One of the best offensive tackles in Miami history. And then a lot of those guys from the 2001 team, James Lewis, Jamal Green, multiple New Jersey guys, of course, David Njoku, Greg Olson at the tight end position from that state. So Jalen Matthews, he visited unofficially. I was at practice when he was there. Definitely looked the part. Not a fat guy at all, but also not skinny. He looked like a prototypical offensive tackle in terms of build. He was there with his girlfriend, I believe, and some members of his family. So he was there, serious unofficial visit. Wasn't just here for a quick one. And now is back on an official. The 246th ranked player in the nation, according to the 247 composite, number 26 offensive tackle, 4-star. And when you're watching the film, what jumps out, two-way player, which is something you saw in a lot of the guys that got drafted in the first round this year on offensive line. They were two-way guys, really all the way down from the NFL draft. The offensive linemen that went both ways had a higher chance of being drafted because of the athleticism, the toughness. There's a guy at 79 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. You're seeing that in his highlights. Miami, Rutgers, Tennessee official visits. He was originally committed to Penn State when Miami started recruiting him. You see nice athleticism and pass protection, although most of the highlights are on defense. And an interesting player, Pete.
Yeah, and it's funny. One of the plays, I think the second or third play there on the highlight tape was him diagnosing a screen and chasing after a guy downfield. He didn't really make the tackle and wrap it up. He kind of made the play just by chasing after him, but it's the athleticism and it's stuff like that 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 Mirabal and Cristobal are really looking at when they're evaluating these offensive linemen. You said it, playing a lot of defense. I mean, look, he looks like he has some bend, he has some flexibility. It's about coaching all this stuff out of an athlete like this and figuring out his best spot on the line.
And when you're looking at the tackles in this class, again, Jalen Wilkerson last week, Dimitri Manning the following week, some of the guys we're going to talk about today, they are really honing in. And TK Mux is more of a guard, but similar profile in terms of they're getting guys who have the physical dimensions that you need, the athleticism that you need, and then they're going to count on their development. So it's not like they're getting lower rated guys that are more football players than upside guys. With the lower rated guys, and Matthews is a 4-star blue chip player, but some of the guys we'll talk about are closer to 3 stars. They seem to be really focused on getting high upside offensive linemen, guys that if they can develop them will be in that first, second round range. So it's interesting. Different people with different approaches. I think this approach is the better approach, much more similar to what you saw with Jeff Stoutland when he was at Miami, getting a lot of guys like a John Feliciano, who may not have been the most highly rated guy out of school, but had the size, had the athleticism to be an NFL player, of course, where he ended up. So interesting approach. Jalen Matthews, not a sleeper at all, highly rated guy, but someone that Miami thinks could be more than what he's ranked at in that 240 range. They think he could be a much, much better player with his full development.
Yeah, I don't see the same pop as we saw earlier with a Cortez Smith, but a lot of times these taller guys, these longer guys, they really need that coached out of them and how to use that power the right way. So as he continues to develop, should be an interesting one to watch.
Yep. And if you land a guy like that, he'll be protecting the star of the class, right? The quarterback's always a star, and that is Luke Nickel, back to Georgia from Milton High School, Alpharetta, Georgia. 6'2", 205, has now become a 4-star based on his performance. 292 in the composite, 25th ranked QB nationally. He's continued to rise after just a standout junior year. Great performances on the 7-on-7 circuit. Now is going to Elite 11 with the chance to push his profile further. South Carolina, Florida State pushing, but he is holding firm with the Canes right now. And I think Miami is very happy he is. They love the kid, and they've grown to like him even more as they've learned more about him, as he's visited after they saw him in spring with Shannon Dawson visiting him. He's continuing to climb up the board, and he was already the quarterback, right? So they already had faith in him, and his faith is being rewarded and is getting firmer. Look at the stats, 2023, junior All-America, Max Prep, second team. He led Milton to a 13-2 record, Georgia State title at the high classification. 66% passer, 3,914 yards, 39 touchdowns, 5 INTs, also ran for 6 TDs. Makes sense. His brother's a tight end at Michigan State, father a tight end at Stanford. So you see some of that athletic ability. I think when you watch Luke Nickel, he came down here to play Western High School in South Florida. I know 247 got to look at him there, and he wasn't like blowing anyone away physically, didn't have a huge game. Western's defensive coordinator, shout out to Coach Macho, post on CanesInsight.com forums, and he said the guy was impressive, didn't like coaching against him. And I think since that game, he's only continued to rise, really got hot. The numbers speak for themselves, won the state title. When you watch him, Pete, I see kind of like your old school Miami quarterback, where it's not going to wow you with the physicality or the off-script stuff, but he's going to distribute the ball to his playmakers, make quick decisions, read the field very well, and get the ball out accurately and on time.
He throws a pretty ball too, which, I mean, look, we hear so much in today's game about the athletic ability at the quarterback position, and you see him here getting out and making some throws on the run. He's not small, right? He's not a super small quarterback. He's not 6'4", 6'5", right? But he's a good size. And again, you hear so much about athletic ability and what quarterbacks do testing wise, but at the end of the day, how do they throw the football? Do they put it in the right place for their playmakers? And that's the main thing you see on film. You said quick to make decisions, gets the ball out, plays a little bit of that point guard role, so to speak. And again, he has different throws in the bag, right? We see him throwing with touch. We see him, fitting it in there with a little bit more zip when need be, but really is able to make different throws in different windows.
And look, the deep ball part of it, I think so many people confuse arm strength with deep ball, and those are not synonymous. The guy's gone. I'm still messing up his name. Jakari Brown, who recently transferred to UCF, had probably the strongest arm on the team, but his deep ball was probably the weakest because he just threw it on a dead line, and it was not very catchable. It didn't allow the receiver to get under it. Nickel has a better deep ball. I mean, his ball, he consistently challenges down the field. He's able to make those throws because of his timing, because of his touch, letting the receiver run under it. Now, there's more to throwing down the field than just the deep ball, driving the ball and things like that. I don't think is going to be his absolute strength. He's going to have to get by in anticipation.
Anticipation looks good, though.
Oh, it looks great. And quick decision-making. I think it's different than the tackles. The tackles, you're saying these guys are guys that if they hit, they're going to be first-round picks. I think with Nickel, if he hits, he's going to be a very, very good college quarterback. And we've seen the Jason Whites, the Gino Torettas, guys hold the Heisman Trophy at the highest level. Even nowadays, a Dylan Gabriel, right? Yeah. Dylan Gabriel, not Trevor Lawrence in terms of his physicality, but he's somebody who wins a lot of games, throws the ball for a lot of yards, and it was a very high demand this year as a transfer. I think Nickel's kind of in that mold. He's bigger, maybe more physically talented than a Gabriel, at least in terms of size. But what you're getting is a great quarterback, a guy who knows how to play quarterback and has succeeded at the highest levels of high school.
And just comparing him somewhat to these other guys on the roster, right, that Miami has recruited out of high school. Emory Williams, he's probably going to be a little bit more polished than Emory coming in. Emory, we understand his physical tools and showed some good things during spring. And then I think has a little bit more athletic ability than an Emory Williams, who came in and obviously was good enough to help Miami win football games last season and help Miami be in position to win games. But I think with nickel, again, you're probably getting a more polished product than a Judd Anderson, for example.
Definitely more polished than Judd. Emory to me was pretty polished, but I think with
Emory was polished, but I don't know if he was as athletic as Nickel. Not saying that Nickel's running and taking off like that.
I agree with that. I think Nickel is a looser, more natural passer than Emory. Emory, there's some tightness to him when he throws. Nickel, it looks nice and easy. Throws with different trajectories. I think, yes, Emory's bigger. Both guys are really smart, but I think Nickel, way more productive in high school, had a better team, but was more productive. And I just think is a more natural, loose passer of the football. And look, maybe one day they'll be selling those number 5 nickel jerseys at Caneswear in Davie or caneswear.com. I know right now they got the number 1 if you want to be Cam Ward, Xavier Estrepo, a lot of different jersey selections. Stock up now so you are ready for the season. Enjoying the summer, you're at the beach, you're wearing your Canes gear. They got everything you need, coolers, koozies. Caneswear and caneswear.com will take care of you for the summer, the fall, whenever they have it. And if you're a Panthers fan, obviously the Stanley Cup is coming. They got their gear. When it comes to the Panthers, better than anybody. So go to caneswear.com or Caneswear, the store in Davie, and be in sports fans heaven if you are a Miami sports fan. Going to the other side of the ball, but staying in the state of Georgia. Staying at Savannah for the same place as the last defensive tackle we just talked about. That is Walter Mathis out of Calvary Day School, defensive tackle out of Savannah. 6'3", 285. Not as highly rated as Elijah Griffin, not as big, but 420th national, 49th defensive lineman, a high 3-star. But to me, when I look at this kid, first thing, who's recruiting him? Miami, Clemson, Auburn. The latter two, certainly schools known for having good defensive linemen, first, second, third round defensive linemen. Clemson and Auburn are that. So that's a good sign. This is a player who took an unofficial visit to Miami in March. So they got eyes on him then. We're watching a sophomore highlight here because his junior highlight was divided into individual games. So I wanted to put his sophomore highlight. But you could see, even though he's grown since then, the 4-point stance, he is ready to uncoil with explosiveness off the ball. Extremely twitchy, more straight line drives than maybe an Elijah Griffin, but man, he is coming off like a fastball, also lines up at defensive end. That's really, just watching the film, the word I wrote in bold letters and underlined, twitch and get off.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like he has that explosive, squatty power. But a lot of times when you hear squatty power, it's negative term where it's like, oh, this guy's too short and he's really just he has that squatty power. He's too small, right? But that's not you. He has that explosive ability. No Diddy. He's got the backside. You see that explosive backside, and you see him standing up here off the edge. Like you said, I don't see the same, side to side, maybe flexibility here. But as an interior pass rusher, this kid has some real burst and pop.
And like I said, Clemson and Auburn, 2 schools that you like to be alongside when it comes to defensive linemen, especially Clemson. They always have good defensive linemen. They had 2 great ones last year as far as young guys, replacing Brian Breezy and Miles Murphy, who were themselves first-rounders. Obviously, their tradition of first-round defensive linemen goes back a ways at this point. So that's a school you like in terms of evaluating defensive linemen, to be in the same sentence as. This is a kid who, to me, I didn't know much about him, but when I watched the sophomore film and watched the junior game film, this twitch is rare. I'd be curious to see how big he is in person. Again, listed at 6'3", 285. I'm curious how that looks when he's with these other defensive tackles. I think it's going to be important to compare these guys to each other.
I would compare him to Floyd Boucard, his body type, because I think we had the same questions when we saw his huddle, but then when we saw him in person, he was much bigger than that. And they were doing a lot of the same stuff, playing on the edge, but you could tell that he was more of an interior guy. Yeah,
so these visits are two-way evaluations, right? They're evaluating Miami. Miami's evaluating these kids. And I think the eye test, the off-the-bus test, is very important with the linemen. How do they look next to these other guys? If you bring in a bunch of offensive linemen that are highly rated dudes, and then a defensive lineman you bring in looks small, how is this defensive lineman supposed to beat these offensive linemen at the championship level? So I think that's going to be the evaluation. But off the film, man, he looks outstanding. And I'm encouraged by the guys recruiting him. I'd be curious to see what he looks like in person. Derry Norris, who we're going to talk about in a second, is similar, but a lot to work with in terms of twitch. This next guy I'm about to talk about, you heard about him first. If you're a Canes Connection member, I mentioned him first on Canes Connection Private Insider Zoom. We then talked about him later on the bank on this podcast. And now, a month later, his name is out for everybody to hear. But those of you who follow this podcast, and certainly those of you who are Canes Connection members, heard it first. I will be doing another private Zoom tonight. It is Thursday at 8 p.m. for Canes Connection members. That's official NIL collective of the Canes. Sign up using promo code CIS. You get 20% off the first month, plus access to that private insider Zoom, non-public information, and it's going to be the most direct sourcing on these kids. I will be speaking to my sources later today, and that's going to go straight into that private Zoom. So if you have not signed up, please do ask about it. People will tell you that's where you want to be for the absolute most direct, most inside information on the Canes. And of course, you are supporting Miami's NIL, supporting the cause of landing players like this. So you help the cause, you're part of the solution, you're part of that sixth ring, and you're also getting the best info. CanesConnection.com, promo code CIS. So anyways, kid you heard about first on that show, Timothy Merritt, defensive back out of Parker High School in Birmingham, Alabama. The range stands out when you watch him. 6'2", 180, 449th national player, 37th ranked cornerback, high 3-star with some helium. He's rising. Miami, Tennessee, and Arkansas are in the mix. Played safety. A lot of this high school film you're watching, but projects as a cornerback. Connection to the staff, Chevis Jackson from Mobile, Alabama, has been recruiting him. So if you're wondering why we're so prominent in Alabama, it's not just Cristobal's ties. You also have Chevis Jackson working this. Timothy Merritt's a guy with a basketball background, but recently he's been focusing on football. So you see him rise, raw, but really, really explosive.
Yeah, and you see him playing safety. You see him playing corner. And in that clip at corner was really just smothering the wide receiver with his length, which a lot of times these younger, longer, lean corners, they don't know how to use that length to their advantage just yet. And it seems like definitely at the point of attack, he has the physicality. I mean, you see him here against much smaller receiver on the outside here, and wasn't covering him, but the physicality's there. And again, like you said, they've got some ties in Alabama because they're finding kids who have the traits that you're looking for at some of these skill positions.
Yeah, staying at the corner position and going back to the state of Georgia, Mark Manfred, cornerback out of Sprayberry High School, Marietta, Georgia, 585th national player, 54th cornerback according to the composite. Official visits to Miami and Cincinnati, Michigan offered. This is one I'm trying to figure out why he's so low rated and why the bigger schools are not after him. We saw the Michigan offer, which is good, but I'm trying to figure out with this guy what the problem is. And sometimes there is a problem, sometimes there's not, and it's just an under the radar guy that you'll see on Sundays. This guy had 14 receptions, 178 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he played some receiver. On the defensive end, 57 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, an INT, a forced fumble. 28.8 yards per return, 2 touchdowns, plus he was a punt returner. 6'2", 175, so he's a little skinny, but he's got some length. Played basketball. And I love the profile. Going back and looking at corners who have made the NFL, including, guys like Quinyon Mitchell, who's a 3-star from Florida, ended up going in the first round to the Philadelphia Eagles. Similar profile. Played basketball, right? Played offense. This guy returns kicks to the house. So he has some speed and some athletic ability to make plays both ways, something that's been lacking from Miami's defensive backfield recruits in recent years. Plays zone, plays man. He has that corner footwork. He can tackle. You see him diagnosed with the quick trigger, the ball skills, both at receiver and then also at corner. You see him go up and go for the ball. He runs down ball carriers multiple times in these highlight reels, which shows you not just the speed to run guys down, but the effort. Returner, he's fighting for the extra yard. So to me, Pete, when I watch the film and I look at the profile, I say, what am I missing with Mark Manfred?
Yeah, and look, I don't worry so much about these guys who are skinny. Obviously, they're all going to put good weight on in college, but I don't worry about the physicality aspect of it. When you see him on film, here he is making tackles, making tackles in the open field, being physical downhill, right? Sometimes you watch these corners and if they're not involved in the play, they're trying to stay to the sideline and not only have to really make a tackle if they have to, right? He's going out there and seeking contact, right? So to me, it's really only a problem once they're skinny and they don't show that they're willing to play physical. you don't need these corners to be Ray Lewis out there tackling, right? You do need them to be willing and able, like you're on an exit row, to tackle out there in open space, right? And then hopefully if they can't make the tackle on themselves by themselves, that, you know, hopefully help comes. But that's what I see on film with him.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I've watched a lot of cornerback film from guys that were 3-stars, like a Jair Alexander, for example, who was a 3-star in North Carolina, went to Louisville, goes to the first round Pro Bowl corner. And when you watch those guys, Devin Witherspoon, there's certain things, the special teams, the two-way production, the basketball background, the complete player, the late blooming to a certain extent. You see it with some of those guys, and I see some of those traits with Mark Manford. Not saying he's going to be a first-rounder, but he's one I'm watching to figure out, what am I missing on him? Some of the 3-stars, I can see why they're lower ranked. They may prove certain things wrong and then earn a higher ranking. With Manford, that's one I don't get. Switching gears to another 3-star player, Derry Norris out of Spruce Creek, Port Orange, Florida. That's the Volusia County, Daytona Beach area. 589th national player, composite, 59th defensive lineman in terms of ranking, on 247. So he's a 3-star player. This guy, he to me, it comes down to size with him. You look at the background. He played stand-up defensive end as a sophomore, more of a down lineman, but still an edge player as a junior. Then he watches spring tape as a rising senior. He's playing defensive tackle. Good production, 63 tackles, 12 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks. Also ran the ball a little bit on offense. I heard he's someone Miami liked when they saw him in spring, kind of a rising player. Highly athletic, as you can see on these highlights. He lists a 4.6 on his profile. I don't know if that's verified or not, but he definitely looks athletic. 6'3", 285. I think that's the key. How close is he to that? It's hard to tell without seeing him in person. He actually ran the 100 meters this year in track, 13:05, so not the fastest time in the world, but he was out there running it. He's someone that, offers from NC State as far as visits to NC State, Minnesota, Purdue. Those are the teams in the mix. You've seen those guys sign underrated players that end up blowing up at the defensive line position. To me, with him, Derry Norris, it just comes down to size and power because the athleticism you could see on tape.
Yeah, and like you said, got to give him credit for going out there and running. His school must not be too great in track, but no, the playing both sides of the ball. I think he's another guy probably that you got to see what he looks like in person. And look, a guy like this, you look at this film last season, a guy like this could have a growth spurt in the offseason and look even bigger. And we already know the athletic ability he has, right? So potentially a high riser here as these ratings will get updated throughout the summer and early part of fall here.
Yeah, and look, some of these 3-stars, I understand why they're 3-stars. You're betting on projection, like with Norris. The size is probably why he's a 3-star. You're betting on his body, and if it goes down to the coaches see him in person and project weight on the frame. Couple guys here, I don't get their rating. Manford is one of them. The other one, Dalen Upshaw, wide receiver out of Phoenix City, Alabama Central High School, 643rd ranked player nationally, 103rd ranked wide receiver, does have good visits set up. He's going to Florida, he's going to Miami, and then UCF. So state of Florida is centric, even though he's from Alabama. 5'11", 175. So maybe the skinniness is a problem like it is with Manford. But man, to me, wide receiver is a production position. This guy had 59 catches, 1,185 yards, 15 touchdowns. He checks that box big time. Again, I like to go back and look at why wide receivers fail or succeed. Production is a huge reason why they succeed. Nikar, Miami just signed from Georgia, very productive player, had a great spring. Dalen Upshaw fits that bill. He impressed at Battle Miami against some of the best players in the 7-on-7 circuit. And man, just watch the highlights. He releases off the line. He tracks the ball. He runs routes. He has some core strength and balance after the catch, despite being skinny. You see him break tackles. He's pulling away from guys. He's not a track guy, but he's running. He has a basketball background as well. This guy, just like Mark Manford, watching his highlights, I say, man, this is an impressive player.
Yeah, and at the receiver position, sometimes we just go straight based on their speed and their numbers, but he looks like a real polished receiver at this stage of the game, right? And we've seen the last couple of years, this last year, Miami brought in a couple young receivers and a JoJo Trader and a Nikar, right? Who, yes, they do have the physical traits, but they're ready-made to go as soon as they step on campus and be contributors, right? So that remains to be seen what they're going to end up doing this season. But from what we saw in the spring, that seems to be the case. And you keep stocking the cupboard like with guys like this who are ready to go and are less projections, right? And look, there's going to be guys who aren't ready to go necessarily to make an impact, but they do have those traits and they'll end up making it. But he looks like he's someone who could make an impact pretty early.
And look, even the NFL draft, you see trends, and the trends you see guys that can run routes, guys that are productive, just like in high school, create separation, catch the ball with their hands, track the ball, succeed. I think with this kid, the size, like the skinniness, is probably what the key is going to be. We'll see what his frame looks like in person, see if he can gain weight, but he doesn't look like a wallflower or just like a daffodil in these highlights, man. He takes some hits and he keeps his balance. He seems like he's kind of wiry strong. So that'll be interesting to watch his development. I love the film, and Miami likes this player quite a bit. So closing up here with the last player on the visit list. This is offensive tackle Demetrius Campbell from Orlando Christian Prep in Orlando, Florida, unrated on the composite, 69th ranked offensive tackle on 247. So a decent ranking on 247, but unrated on the composite. This is a player originally from Maine, but they don't produce a ton of football players. Has some AAU basketball experience. His brother played basketball for Notre Dame. 6'6", 300 pounds. So he's got the frame. Official visits set up to Georgia Tech and Ole Miss. So this is more what I expect to be a 3-star player. Someone who plays at a small school, has a lot of projection left with him. He went to the Under Armour camp and flashed. He was listed as a guy that flashed, but it's not like he dominated. So I get why this type of player is a lower rated player. You're projecting a lot with him. But if you're Mirabal, he kind of fits the bill of what you're doing at tackle. He's 6'6". He's got the height. You can't teach height. He doesn't have to lose weight, but you're going to put weight on him. He doesn't have to gain too much weight. So he's in the right sweet spot from a frame standpoint. Similar to a Jalen Matthews, similar to a Jalen Wilkerson, another Orlando area basketball player who visited last week. These are the kind of guys that he seems to be targeting, Coach Mirabal, at the offensive tackle position. Guys that could be, if it all goes right, first round, second round type player. And I got to say, again, this is a lower rated player. I get the rating, but I was expecting him to look worse, quite frankly, when I watched the huddle.
He looks fluid, man. He looks fluid. Look, that the competition does not look great whatsoever. They just played the clip that we were talking about before the show, D, where he ran the guy 10 yards out of bounds into the plastic fence. But I mean, it's tough to see the strength because he's going against guys who are way smaller than him, but he doesn't look stiff at all. And again, basketball player, you question toughness. We don't really know how tough he is based off this stuff, but he doesn't look like he's a softie by any stretch. So you have a lot of tools to work with here.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, you're not watching the video, I encourage watch this film because I thought it was a very interesting film for Demetrius Campbell. Again, Jalen Wilkerson last week visitor from Orlando, very, very similar, maybe a little heavier at 330, but same height.
He eats up a lot of space, man. I'm looking at some of these clips, man. Once he starts getting upfield on these downfield blocks, it's like he takes a step or two and he's a long strider, which it's interesting to see some of his athletic ability here.
Yeah, he can run. And I think, to me, with all these guys that are the offensive line sort of projections, that aren't the Francis Mauigoas where my grandma can, scout him, but these are guys that you're projecting. I think it's, number one, how does the body look in person? Which is just hard for us to see here because there's so much to a physical body type projection that's not in the numbers. All those numbers, first of all, they're not always accurate, number one. Number two, they're not created equally. Guys have big hands. Guys have wide shoulders. Guys have long arms. Guys have big lower bodies and thin upper bodies. Guys have the reverse. And it's that all plays into the weight projection. So I think in terms of evaluating these guys, is going to be the in-person evaluation of the body type is going to be key. And then also demeanor stuff, intangible stuff, because if you're a project or an upside guy and you don't have the intangibles, it's going to be very hard for you to reach your ceiling. If you have all the intangibles in the world and then you have the upside, it's a lot easier to see it coming together with good coaching, which Coach Mirabal, I'm confident in that aspect of it. So those are things we can't really see. But if we're just talking about are these guys tall enough and athletic enough to play at the University of Miami at tackle? I think Campbell and Matthews both show those flashes.
All right, you just went through that whole list there, 14 names or 13 names. I forget what it was, but it's a big list, man. And again, if you were listening on audio, we had all of the highlights as well up there. So go back and check out the YouTube video version. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel. And again, D, I know you have your Canes Connection Q&A tonight for Canes Connection members.
Yeah, and I'll be digging deep on all these guys and also last week's visitors. So the utmost exclusive, non-public stuff I can't share in this kind of setting with the Knowles and the Gators and everybody else lurking. Check out canesconnection.com, promo code CIS, sign up, be part of the solution, and get the absolute latest. If you can't make the call and do the Q&A tonight at Thursday at 8 p.m., we send a link out with the recording right after to Canes Connection members, so you won't miss anything. So again, thank you guys for supporting. Like and subscribe. Go Canes.
Go Canes.
Yeah. This an insight to the Canes, and you know we ain't playing no games. Joaquin said dominate, so that's what we do. Home of the legends and 7th floor crew. Down in Miami where hurricanes brew. You here for the rumors, we bring you the news. Cause it's all about the you, and nobody do it like CanesInSight. 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 It's CanesInSight.